How many times in this 100-plus day war that the president initiated on his own have we heard these contradictions? We're winning, we're losing. We're at the bargaining table, we're going to blow them into kingdom come.
Iranians are saying there's no scheduled visit for the IAEA inspectors. Is that part of your agreement?
They're wrong. They're wrong. They know they're wrong.
Good Tuesday evening, I'm Del Walters, taking you through a timeline of the day's biggest developments, from a dangerous heat wave across much of Europe to an update on the tragic case of Nancy Guthrie, who went missing in February. We begin tonight with our political roundtable as several states hold key primaries across the country.
Primary elections are underway in 4 states, including New York, Maryland, South Carolina, and Utah. But the highly watched race could determine what's resonating for Democrats ahead of the midterms this fall in New York. So joining me for today's roundtable are Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty in Washington and our senior national correspondent Alex Miller in New York. Thank you guys for being here. And Alex, let's start with you. You are in New York. So talk about why tonight means so much for New York City Mayor Mamdani.
It's really a test for his brand of the Democratic Party. It is, he has really gone all in with the Democratic Socialists of America. He has endorsed 3 candidates, really going against people who have helped him get elected in the past. We can go into those races a little bit later. But when you look at these specific races, if any of these candidates win, it could help propel that socialist part of the Democratic Party into a bigger stratosphere here. Mamdani obviously is very popular in New York, and it begs the question of whether it's the man or whether it's the policies here in New York that are popular. And so when you look at who he has endorsed, rivals really to many of the incumbents. If he is able to win, you could see that the Socialist Party really has become a bigger fixture in New York politics than it ever has before.
Yeah, Raph, let's talk about that, because the question begs, is socialism having a moment? It's not just Mamdani in New York, as Alex is talking about. So are voters showing more of a willingness to elect candidates who embrace this?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen it in some mayor's races, New York being the best example, but here in D.C., a Democratic Socialist won last week. Janice Lewis George most certainly will go on to win in November. Seattle also. L.A., Nithya Raman will go up against Karen Bass. She's also a member of the Democratic Socialists, hoping to win that seat in the fall. It's been interesting, and it goes back before Mamdani. This really started with Bernie Sanders in 2016, at least this most recent surge in democratic socialism, both the interest in it and how it has motivated voters. Earlier this year, for the first time, the DSA had 100,000 members. That, of course, came just shortly after Mamdani was sworn in as the new mayor of New York. But it's been fascinating to see all of these candidates who are talking or sort of holding the banner of socialism. They're really focused on affordability and making government that can make you better afford groceries. Childcare was a huge issue here in D.C. with some of the nation's most expensive childcare. And so it's really been the term that has been thrown around as sewer socialism. It is focusing on affordability issues and not so much overhauling Wall Street. Of course, Bernie Sanders, key to his messaging has been taxing millionaires and billionaires, but it's really focusing on everyday Americans and affordability that is resonating so much with Democratic voters. And it should be noted that this is a phenomenon that has been restricted to blue city states. It's not necessarily in the mainstream of independent, more moderate voters, but it'll be fascinating to watch tonight those results that Alex is going to outline from New York, because it'll give us a lot better insights into how much legs this actually has.
Yeah, and quickly, let me just follow up with that before we get to Alex, because then are we seeing a growing divide between progressive and establishment Democrats? I mean, will this tell us tonight in the results? And if so, then at what point do moderates, or I guess traditional Democrats, kind of say, well, where do I fit in? A little bit like what the GOP has been seeing with the MAGA folks and the hard right Republicans and the more moderate Republicans.
Yeah, I think, we've seen this under Trump, and it has been interesting. I talked about democratic socialism. It kind of tapered off a little bit under Joe Biden when the Democratic Party identified more with more moderate politicians, of course, nominating Joe Biden, ultimately seeing that as the best way to win back the White House. In this second term of Trump, in the early on days, we saw this idea of having a Democrat who comes from a red or purplish state, the kind of person who can work across the aisle, appeal to some of those moderate voters. But now, as Trump's popularity has plummeted, we've seen the party gravitate more towards the progressive or those who are willing to be fighters for the party. And so that divide has always been there. It's been there in Trump's first term and now second term. But it's a fascinating dynamic to watch as we start talking about how the 2028 Democratic presidential field could shape up and which direction the party ultimately goes to try to win back the White House.
And Alex, all right, let's get back to the New York City primary today, because there's some other interesting Democratic battles happening. What are you watching?
Well, Holly, there are 4 races to be paying attention to. Only one of them Mamdani has not endorsed in. So let's talk about that one first. That's New York's 12th district. That is the replacement for Congressman Jerry Nadler, who is retiring. This is an 8-person race. The 2 leading contenders, though polling, I should say, in New York City is very scarce, are Alex Borez and Michael Lasher. They're both assembly members, but you also have former Republican George Conway, who is now obviously a very big Trump critic, as well as JFK's grandson, Jack Schlossberg. Now, this has become one of the most expensive races that we have seen. AI has gotten involved, Anthropic supporting Borez's candidacy, and OpenAI also getting involved, talking about government regulation, whether it should be on the state or the federal level. As I mentioned, the 2 assembly members seem to be leading the pack on this one. And then you have these 3 races that Mamdani has endorsed in. The first one was for retiring Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez. What's interesting here is she endorsed someone else, as has the governor. Mamdani putting his push behind the very progressive candidate there. Then when you look at New York's 10th district, Democrat Dan Goldman, who is the incumbent here, is trying to keep his seat from Brad Lander. What's interesting here is these are both Jewish men who are running, really particularly focusing on the Israel issue here, having vastly different perspectives on it. This is a hotly contested race. Now, again, polling is scarce here, but it shows that Lander might actually be able to unseat Goldman here. And then the last race here is Daria Lizer Chevalier and Adriano Espaillat. What's interesting here is Espaillat has been in his seat for quite some time, and he had effectively been promised Mamdani's support. Mamdani withdrew it and threw it behind the DSA candidate here, and that's a big deal because she has had a lot of issues since announcing her candidacy with posts that she has made. She's 32 years old. She is one who was protesting Israel on October 8th before, obviously, Israel launched its offensive into Gaza, and so she's had a lot to answer for that. But Mamdani has tried to rally the get out the vote effort here. We saw very low early voting numbers, about 172,000, which is to be expected to be much lower than the 400,000 that we saw during Mamdani's primary. But still, that is a very low number. We saw him out there campaigning for these 3 very progressive candidates, obviously trying to push forward his own politics and also his influence on these kinds of elections.
So, Raph, let's take the 10,000-foot view. What could today's results tell us about Democratic voter enthusiasm as we are, 4 months away from the midterms?
Yeah, well, zooming out even a little bit more, we can just kind of look at more encompassing what this primary season up to this point has shown us. And actually, the Washington Post did a pretty interesting analysis, and I have the numbers right here. I want to get it right. They looked at 990 races in 25 states. 90% of those, Holly, Dems in the House primaries saw greater turnout than in 2022. So all that is to say that all of these races, both the primaries that we've seen up to this point, the special elections, have seen really strong turnout, stronger turnout than 4 years ago. You put that in the context of the generic congressional polling, which shows Americans by and large favoring Democrats, and these special elections where Democrats have continued to overperform, even in cases, races that they have not ultimately been successful. That has Democrats feeling awfully optimistic about what this fall could ultimately bring.
I guess we'll see where this all leads us. All right, Scripps News political director Andrew Rafferty and senior national correspondent Alex Miller, who has a long night and a big day tomorrow. We will be checking back and continuing this conversation. Thank you both.
Ahead on Today as It Happened.
There's only so much that can be done, especially if schools haven't got the funding to cover the cost of adaptation.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. Here's another look at the stories driving today's headlines.
Police in California are investigating a deadly shooting at a library that left 2 people dead and a suspect in custody. It happened in Chico, less than 100 miles north of Sacramento. Police say Monday evening they responded to sounds of gunshots from inside the library. 2 adults were killed and a child was taken to the hospital. The suspect has been identified as an 18-year-old man. He has been charged with 2 counts of murder, and police say he was motivated by previous U.S. mass shootings, including one at Columbine High School. A new federal investigation is shining light on a deadly building collapse in Florida 5 years ago. It found the Champlain Towers in Surfside had been failing for weeks before it collapsed. That collapse happened after the pool deck fell into the underground parking garage, and that killed nearly 100 people. Investigators discovered decades of corrosion and modifications added weight to the pool deck, leaving it compromised. A final federal report is still to come. And the NBA draft tips off Tuesday night, but ahead of it, there's a big trade involving a 2-time MVP Milwaukee Bucks superstar. That's Giannis Antetokounmpo, sorry about that, is reportedly taking his talents to South Beach to join the Miami Heat. In return, the Bucks are getting 4 players and a handful of draft picks. That includes the number 13 pick in this year's draft. The trade can't officially take place until the league starts on July 6th. Giannis won an NBA championship with Milwaukee in 2021. Extreme heat is spreading across Europe for the second time in 2 months. Schools have closed, trains have shut down.
There's only so much that can be done, especially if schools haven't got the funding to cover the cost of adaptations.
I suppose that the schools need to think about how they're going to tackle this in the future. Well, some one-off closure is fine, we can cope with it somehow. If this becomes a regular thing, we're all working parents, so that's going to be very difficult to manage.
I do feel a lot more hot, and it's harder to go to the park and have a nice time outside.
It is so hot in France that drinking alcohol was banned in certain parts of the country to try and protect people's health. Scripps News international correspondent Ross Cullen is joining us live in Paris, France. And Ross, I understand the heat now has turned deadly. What's the latest on this heat wave?
Yeah, Holly, here in the center of the French capital, it is extremely hot. It is uncomfortable out here, but in fact, that is not the top temperature today. 113.45 degrees in Rennes, which is a northern city in a very wet and cold part of the country. So if it's very hot there, it shows you what it's like in the other hot parts of the French Republic, like Bordeaux and other southern cities. The French Prime Minister holding another crisis meeting today. He's been holding daily meetings with ministers to try to get a handle on the situation, and he announced earlier on Tuesday that the total number of drownings in the past 5 days has now risen to 40. And then in addition, 2 young children aged 2 and 4 died after being left in a hot car, and 3 elderly people also succumbed to heat-related complications. So it is a deadly heat wave, particularly with people going in unsupervised parts of rivers and the sea, just trying to get some relief from the heat, but they have been getting into difficulty in the water.
And Ross, Germany also experiencing one of the most intense heat waves in recent years. What's happening on that front?
Yeah, certainly is intense, certainly is lasting in Germany. in Spain, in Italy, red alerts like we have here in France, red alerts in Italy, in Florence and Rome, other cities as well under extreme heat, even the United Kingdom, even Ireland, which is often doesn't have the same weather as the rest of Europe, very hot into the mid-80s in even the southwest of Ireland, in County Kerry, where it is usually very fresh, should we say, but very warm there as well with this heat dome effect. It is not going anywhere soon. We are expecting temperatures of around 110 Fahrenheit, around 40 degrees here in Paris tomorrow, Wednesday, and also Thursday. Holly?
Wow. Well, as somebody who lives in Atlanta, we know how brutal the heat can be. Stay hydrated, stay in the shade, Ross, and get an air conditioning when you can. Stay safe. Scripps News international correspondent Ross Cullen live for us. Thank you.
Coming up later on Today, As It Happened.
There's no single solution to the housing challenges that Americans are facing all across the country. And there's a lot of effort that has to take place at the state and local level as well. But this is a very important piece of legislation at the federal level.
This is Today As It Happened, Scripps News daily review of the events and stories that shaped our day. Let's continue.
The Senate passed a sweeping bipartisan housing bill that could bring down home prices across the country. The bill cuts federal housing regulations, gives more control to local governments, and bans corporate investors from buying single-family homes. Chris Vincent is with Habitat for Humanity. He's the International Vice President of Government Relations and Advocacy, and he joins us now. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks for being on.
So we hear a lot about interest rates, inflation, inventory shortages. So if Congress does go through and pass this bill today, why should a family watching at home believe it's going to actually make a difference in their ability to find an affordable place to live?
Yep, we are at Habitat for Humanity. We're very excited about this bipartisan legislation. This has been a long time coming. Congress has been working on. Really, there's about 50 pieces of this legislation that have come together in this package. And we really think it is an important piece to step forward that modernizes a lot of programs, puts in place some new innovative programs, and really works to take a first step in addressing the nation's affordability challenges. So then, there's no single solution to the housing challenges that Americans are facing all across the country. And there's a lot of effort that has to take place at the state and local level as well. But this is a very important piece of legislation at the federal level, and it's historic in the sense of both its bipartisan support and its significance across the entire spectrum of housing.
So for the average family struggling to buy a house or even afford rent, how quickly could they see any impact from this legislation?
It will take a little bit of time. Any piece of legislation that goes into implementation is going to take some time, and it's not going to have an immediate direct impact on home prices. Those are very significant macroeconomic challenges that affect that. But does it create new opportunity? Will it create more units of housing? Does it create more opportunities for organizations like Habitat for Humanity and a whole host of other housing organizations that are excited about this bill to begin to increase supply, to address whole home repairs, to have better tools at hand when it comes to disaster response and housing issues? There's a lot in this bill to like. There's no overnight solution to the housing affordability challenges, but we're excited to work with all across the spectrum to implement this bill and to make sure that Americans continue to see some support when it comes to housing affordability.
So what do you think, what role should local governments play alongside federal efforts to increase housing supply?
Yeah, local governments have a huge role. They need to be much more open to allowing more units, increasing supply, being focused on finding land, finding property that they can hand over to organizations, to developers. Then we need to get more communities willing to build more units. We have a supply challenge across the country, rural, urban, suburban areas, pretty much everywhere. And so we need to find ways to increase as much supply as possible to enable developers to do that at scale, as well as smaller developers and nonprofits that need to be involved. It's an all hands on deck effort to address the housing affordability challenge, but the local governments have a huge role in really facilitating access to land and supply.
You know, we hear a lot about the housing crisis, but what does that actually look like on the ground in communities across America where you're working? What are you hearing from Habitat families in states across the country about challenges they're facing right now?
Yeah, it is a challenging time. Our network is very diverse. We have close to over 900 affiliates and touches almost every county in the country, and so we really see and feel it in all parts of the country. It's a challenge to afford repairs. It's a challenge to afford a down payment. It's a challenge to afford new affordable home ownership. There's a record lack of starter homes. So it's really hard for families to move from rental housing into new houses. The faster that can happen, the more rental units there are, the more starter homes there are, the better. So it's really felt in a whole host of ways. Insurance prices have increased. All of the supplies in houses themselves have increased. And so it's a daunting challenge that a lot of the country is facing, but we're doing everything we can to address it in our own context across our network.
Still ahead on Today as it happened.
Today's show anchor Savannah Guthrie is responding to new information publicly circulating about her mother's disappearance. I'm senior national investigative correspondent Lori Jane Gliha. Ahead, what was in a ransom note that was delivered months ago that raises new questions about whether her mother is still alive?
Thank you for rejoining us for Today as it happened. I'm Del Walters with a look at the day's other important stories. Some disturbing new details concerning the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. She, of course, is the mother of Today's show host, Savannah Guthrie. Nancy Guthrie has been missing now for close to 5 months. Our senior national investigative correspondent, Lori Jane Gliha, joins us, and she was on the ground in Arizona in the days after Nancy Guthrie went missing. And Lori Jane, all of these headlines over the last 24 hours pertain to details of a ransom note that was sent several months ago.
Right, yeah. Information has been circulating in the last day about the contents of a ransom note sent to the Guthrie family months ago. And it raises questions, Del, about whether Nancy Guthrie is even alive.
This is a new story today that is on your radar, but this is the life that my sister lives, that I live, that my brother lives, that our extended families live, that our children live every day. And we are in agony.
Today's show host Savannah Guthrie reacting to circulating news reports detailing the contents of a ransom note sent to her family months ago. Many of those news reports saying the message indicated her mother had died.
I don't have any comment on this story, and I'm not involved in our coverage, but I can't pretend I'm not here. And so since I am, I wanted to just take the opportunity to ask people to beg people to come forward. Somebody knows something.
The national TV news anchor's mother disappeared February 1st after the FBI says she was kidnapped from her Tucson area home in Arizona. Footage extracted from her doorbell camera revealed a masked man with a gun at her front door. Multiple anonymous messages were delivered to the Guthrie family and to various news agencies following the kidnapping. Some demanding money or Bitcoin, including one sent to Scripps News' Tucson station, K-Gun. That note, sent early in the investigation and never authenticated, demanded money and said Nancy Guthrie was safe but scared. Subsequent notes took a different tone. TMZ's Harvey Levin now revealing publicly the contents of one message his celebrity news site received from someone who demanded a fee in exchange for information about the kidnapper.
Early on, he said time is of the essence, and then a few days after the kidnapping, he said time is no longer of the essence, meaning she wasn't alive.
Savannah Guthrie, meanwhile, still pleading with the public for help.
We cannot be at peace. So no matter how much I try to come out here every day and smile and find that joy, and I will, I promise I will. This is a moment to tell you that we need your help. We're begging for your help.
And a reminder, Del, there is a reward that is being offered. The Guthrie family offering $1 million for the return of their mother, and the FBI offering up to $100,000. Del?
Lori Jane, are the agencies investigating this case confirming these reports about the contents of those ransom notes?
You know, the FBI today, Del, declined to comment on this story, and then I reached out to the Pima County Sheriff's Office to see what they would say. They didn't say much on the record either, other than to say that this case is active and ongoing and that they are working closely with the FBI. Del?
Besides what we have heard on the Today Show, has Savannah Guthrie said anything at all about the contents of the notes that her family received?
Well, she did do an interview with Hoda Kotb, who was her previous co-host, and she did that a few months ago. And she said in that interview that she felt some of these notes were real. But throughout this entire process, Del, it's never been known if any of these notes have been authenticated or traced to a particular person or a group, or if any of the notes or all of the notes are connected. We do know, however, that there was one person who did send a false demand, who was later charged with the crime after his identity was discovered. But as far as more details about the other notes, that is still hasn't been disclosed. Del?
Our senior national investigative correspondent, Lori Jane Gliha. Lori Jane, thank you very much. The last 8 Americans quarantined in Nebraska after that deadly hantavirus outbreak are now heading home, spending 42 days in that specialized hospital unit. All 8 evacuated from that cruise ship where the outbreak started. It killed 3 and led to more than 120 evacuations. Nebraska's governor saying their recovery is the greatest gift, in his words, we could have asked for. Tucker Carlson saying he is done supporting the Republican Party, the longtime conservative commentator saying there is no chance of back to GOP in this year's midterm, saying he won't support the Democrats either. Carlson says his break was fueled by disillusionment over President Trump's war with Iran, says it benefited Israel at America's expense. Carlson saying after 35 years defending the party, he now believes its actions are unacceptable and immoral. Candy, soda, sugary drinks. A federal judge saying you can now use your SNAP benefits to buy them. Struck down restrictions that were planned or already in place in 23 states. The judge saying those limits go against the definition of food under the law. Supporters of the ban called it a way to improve our health. Opponents said it was confusing and stigmatizing. No word yet on any possible appeals. We continue to wait for some major Supreme Court cases at this hour, among them the Trump administration's challenge to birthright citizenship. Scripps News legal affairs correspondent Avajoy Burnett joins us now. And Avajoy, U.S. Supreme Court issued a flurry of opinions today, but none of the biggies. So what caught your eye?
Hey there, Del. Well, 5 opinions were issued earlier today, and one of the cases that got my attention involves a person who was an inmate at a federal facility in the state of Louisiana, and his practicing religion is Rastafarianism, and he had some sort of exemption that allowed him to keep his locks while he was still incarcerated. But when he was transferred to another facility, officials in that facility, they wanted to cut his locks, they wanted to shave his hair. He said he wanted to provide proof that he had an exemption, but he was held down, handcuffed, and then shaved. His head was shaved. So in the 6-3 decision earlier today, the United States Supreme Court said the people who were involved here, they cannot be held responsible on a personal basis. Pretty much they are saying these individuals cannot be held liable in their personal capacity because they were working as agents of the state. They were state employees. So that was one of the 5 decisions that was issued earlier today. But to your point, Del, we still have some major ones remaining here, and we continue to wait for them.
So what are those big cases that are still out there? And I guess that means that you're going to be working overtime.
Well, maybe not so much. They still have about a dozen cases. We have the rest of this week and then next week. So with about a dozen cases, there's a possibility that they could certainly do 3 in 3 opinion days, but only the court knows exactly when they will be releasing these things. But some of the big ones, as we have discussed for the last few weeks and even months, the first one here is birthright citizenship. This is a really big one, so significant that President Donald Trump even showed up for arguments back in April. In this particular case, involves whether children who were born to undocumented migrants automatically become United States citizens. The Trump administration says no, but people who sued the Trump administration, they said if this decision, if this particular rule is overturned, it will really undo decades, more than a century of practice here in the United States, which grants automatic United States citizenship for people or babies who were born to undocumented migrants. There's also the issue of transgender women and girls girls in sports. This really is a hot button issue that many people have been watching and waiting for. And the question the justices are considering as we speak is whether transgender women and girls are allowed to participate or compete on all female teams. This case originates out of two separate states. Two cases were consolidated here, one out of West Virginia and then another out of Idaho. So many people are watching and waiting to see what will happen there. And then there are two existing immigration cases. Actually, there are three of them, but one of the really big ones that we're waiting for has to do with temporary protected status. And you've probably heard this being referred to as TPS. And there's a particular law here on the books in the United States which allows people who are fleeing natural disasters or violence in their country to remain here in the United States, live and work here legally. But the Trump administration wants to cancel that program. And this could impact maybe 1 million people here in the United States from 17 countries, including Venezuela, Haiti, Syria. So that's something that we're waiting to find out about. And then we're right now in a midterm year for elections. So there's this case involving mail-in ballots out of the state of Mississippi. And what this case does is it pits a Republican-led state against national Republican leaders, because Mississippi has a law which allows mail-in ballots to be counted up to 5 days after Election Day, as long as they were cast on or before Election Day. The RNC is challenging the state law in Mississippi, and they're saying that this does not provide a uniform end to Election Day all across the country. So we're waiting to see exactly what the justices will do there. And then there's also another big case regarding presidential authority and whether President Donald Trump is allowed to fire a Board of Governors member at the Federal Reserve. So many cases that we continue to track here, Del, about a dozen still outstanding.
Which takes me back to my comments about you'll be working overtime. Our legal affairs correspondent, Avajoy Burnett. Avajoy, thank you very much. Up next on Today as It Happened.
So your reaction to the War Powers Resolution passing?
By a 2-vote margin, the Senate agreed with the House that the war in Iran is illegal. And it's my hope that the administration will take note, that it'll accelerate their negotiations, and that we'll finally reach a resolution to this misguided war.
But this is non-binding. The president doesn't have to obey this.
Welcome back. I'm Del Walters. This is Today as It Happened. Let's continue our look at today's top stories. President Trump, as we continue to watch him in Pennsylvania, so far he has said that Iran has agreed to fully and completely allow inspections of nuclear sites for infinity. Those are his words. It seems, though, no one told Iran, and that contradicts statements made by a spokesman for Iran's foreign minister just today. Then President Trump once again saying today that if Iran didn't agree to inspections, he'd cut off the talks. If you're confused, so is Congress. Here's Democratic Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois. Take a listen.
How many times in this 100-plus day war that the president initiated on his own have we heard these contradictions? We're winning, we're losing. We're at the bargaining table, we're going to blow them into kingdom come. It just goes back and forth. Average American trying to keep up with the president's statements will find it impossible. Listen, I want to see a peaceful resolution of this quickly. The fact of the matter is we don't know where we stand today.
At this hour, we continue to follow breaking news coming out of Capitol Hill. Just moments ago, the Senate letting the president know they don't like what's happening in Iran. The poll showing you don't either. Voting for that bill to put control of the war powers back in the hands of Congress. The vote, however, was close. Let's go straight to our senior congressional correspondent, Nate Reed. Nate, what can you tell us about the vote? Who voted for? Who voted against?
Well, almost all Democrats voted in favor of this resolution. And to be clear, this is just Congress directing Donald Trump, not exactly saying that he has to, but at the same time expressing that Congress would like to end the ongoing war with Iran. Concerns there about the future. I just caught up with Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, Republican, who voted against it. He told me that the entire thing is meaningless. Certainly a lot of Republicans are of that view, but several Republicans did vote with Democrats in favor of getting this thing across the finish line. Among them, Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, Senator Susan Collins of Maine, Senator Murkowski of Alaska, and Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, all voting in favor with Democrats. One Democrat, by the way, voting against this with almost all Republicans. That was, of course, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who has been outspoken on his support for Israel, his desire that Iran be crushed militarily, something that Israel wants as well. So again, a lot of questions about what the future is here, whether the president reacts to this. We have not yet heard any reaction, as it's just happened in the last couple of minutes. But for Democrats who voted in favor of this, they believe that this is sending a strong message here. Here's Senator Chris Coons, the Democrat from Delaware. I caught up with him just a few moments ago. So your reaction to the War Powers Resolution passing?
By a 2-vote margin, the Senate agreed with the House that the war in Iran is illegal. And it's my hope that the administration will take note, that it'll accelerate their negotiations, and that we'll finally reach a resolution to this misguided war.
But this is non-binding. The president doesn't have to obey this. The senator didn't respond to me there, but again, this is a non-binding resolution. This does not require that President Trump remove troops. The president does not necessarily have to veto this resolution. At the same time, it is showing that a majority in Congress, mostly Democrats, but a handful of Republicans in both chambers, the House had passed this a while ago, have now said they want this war with Iran to come to a conclusion. Again, those shifting demographics might make things more difficult for President Trump, especially as his administration reportedly is trying to get a supplemental somewhere in the range of $80 billion in additional funding for the Department of Defense, Department of War, to pay for this ongoing conflict with Iran and, of course, the previous conflict with Venezuela. So a lot of questions about just what the political support will look like. And, Della, as you noted before our break there, Senator Mitch McConnell, the Republican from Kentucky, he continues to be in the hospital. His spokespeople say that he's aware of what's happening and he's dealing with issues of Kentucky and Senate business. At the same time, he is not here on Capitol Hill to vote, so that is another vote. We do not know what direction former Leader McConnell would have voted in, but certainly that could have impacted the final total as well.
Nate, largely symbolic. You're right in that sense. This, I believe, was the 10th time that the Senate has taken up this vote, but this time the vote was different. It also seems to reflect that, what do they call it, the YOLO coalition in Congress right now that says we lost our local elections, our primaries, and they're blaming Donald Trump.
Yeah, so-called YOLO Republicans who have no qualms speaking out against President Trump or his policies. Still a fairly low number of Republicans, but there's questions about just what direction that could go in the coming weeks. Now, to be clear, President Trump still does have the broad support, the vast majority of Republicans up here on Capitol Hill, including Senator Ron Johnson. I believe we have that sound now, which happened just a couple of minutes before I came on with you here, Del. Is this a stain for President Trump? Does this make his job more difficult?
That's news to me that it passed. It's meaningless. It will have no impact. I mean, he'll veto it, so it has no impact.
Is this a sign that numbers are changing in favor of this war in Congress?
Well, a few people change their vote, obviously.
Thank you, sir. President Trump will be here on Capitol Hill tomorrow. He'll be meeting with Senate Republicans. It'll be interesting, of course, to see if there's any backlash for some of those Republican members who voted to send that very strong message to the White House just earlier today. Again, it is but a handful of Republicans who are of that mindset that this war needs to wind down. But still, Republicans have a narrow majority. Some Republicans voting with almost all Democrats, or in this case, pretty much all Democrats, can certainly sway a vote against the president's priorities, something that has just become more difficult for President Trump. The really slim Republican majority he's had this whole Congress just proving to create more and more obstacles for his legislative agenda here on Capitol Hill. And of course, Del, this raises major questions about whether Congress would be able to pass any sort of supplemental funding, $80 billion that Congress is expected to receive a request for, to pay for this ongoing war with Iran.
If you are trying to keep up with our alphabet soup here in Washington, YOLO stands for you only lose once or you only live once, depending on who you talk to. Our senior congressional, live once, okay, our senior congressional correspondent, Nate Reed, for us on Capitol Hill. As always, Nate, thank you very much. Ahead on Today As It Happened.
By the way, yesterday, 19 million barrels of oil flowed out of the Strait of Hormuz, a very beautiful place.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News Daily look back at the stories that mattered most. Let's pick up where we left off.
The reflecting pool looks fantastic. I just got pictures of it. It's beautiful. But somebody went in with a knife and cut it. They cut it up good. And then they cut a 200, 350-foot slip in the form of lots of little slips, real horrible stuff, and they destroyed the grass. We put a brand new big load of grass out there. They destroyed it. So it's all being fixed, but it's a shame.
He didn't provide any evidence, though, of that gas. USA Today reporting at least 5 people have been charged with vandalism, possibly 6. Destruction of government property is the charge. Officials saying the damage happened last week could include chemicals in the water and that long gash along the pool you heard the president talking about. President Trump warning the vandals could face up to 10 years in prison. At least 5 others, by the way, receiving citations. Among them, a former Olympian who denies vandalizing the pool, but admits he did touch the loose materials in the water. Haters of Cristiano Ronaldo have now been silenced. The star forward from Portugal scoring a goal in the 6th minute in today's match against Uzbekistan. Wasn't done, though. Scored again before half. Ronaldo now becoming the first player to score in 6 different World Cups. Portugal, by the way, going on to win 5-0. CR7 was criticized over his performance against the Democratic Republican, the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo last week. He played every minute, didn't score a single goal. That game ended 1-1. The Senate letting the president know they don't like what's happening in Iran. The poll showing you don't either. Voting for that bill to put control of the war powers back in the hands of Congress. The vote was close, 50-48. 4 Republicans breaking ranks and voting yes. Senator Susan Collins, Bill Cassidy, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul. Democrat John Fetterman voting no. In the meantime, President Trump now saying that Iran has agreed to fully and completely allow inspections of its nuclear sites. That contradicts those statements made by Iran's foreign minister, his spokesman, just today. Our senior White House correspondent Haley Bull joins us now. And how is the administration selling this effort so far?
Well, Del, they are forcefully doubling down that Iran has agreed to allow those nuclear inspectors as they're touting this agreement with Iran in the negotiating efforts both stateside and abroad. President Trump specifically praising the efforts during remarks in Pennsylvania, part of domestic travel that was expected to be aggressive at the start of the year, but throughout this conflict has very frequently included messaging on the U.S.'s efforts with Iran. And he particularly, while on the ground at a truck facility, tried to sell his economic message, touting falling oil prices and higher stock market as negotiations have gotten underway this week with Iran following a memorandum of understanding. That, as throughout this conflict, he has faced broader public concern on the economy and been underwater frequently over his handling of both the conflict and the economy. And during those remarks, Del, he made the case once more that he had to take what he called a, quote, detour because Iran, he says, can't have a nuclear weapon. This is something he has pointed to when pressed on the potential impacts for Republicans when it comes to midterm elections and the economic concerns Americans are facing. Take a listen.
Most importantly, we are ensuring one thing very importantly, because this is why I did it. I did it for this reason, 99% for this. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. And they've agreed to that.
That's all for today's edition of Today As It Happened. I'm Del Walters. Thanks for joining us and have a great Tuesday evening.